So I just want to talk a bit about the threats of the Scottish National Party push for another independence referendum in Scotland. It has been quite clear ever since Nicola Sturgeon became leader that this has been her agenda. And I think that's for two reasons. Firstly, it's the core of the SNP's ideology. That is the reason this party exists, the Scottish National Party. Separatism is the very core of their philosophy. So that's one reason. The other reason is probably internal party politics to cement her role as a strong leader. Because during the last referendum in 2014, when Alex Salmond was the leader, and I believe she was his deputy at the time, um, certainly Alex Salmond, and I believe Nicola Sturgeon as well, said that it was a once in a lifetime vote. It was a once in a lifetime event. Well, that's a very short lifetime because it's been a mere 2 years since the last one. Now, Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon had that meeting shortly after May took over in Downing Street, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting at Holyrood. Um, so let's just be clear about one thing. The Scottish National Party exists solely for the reason of breaking up the United Kingdom, of declaring an independent Scotland. And if you think that's scaremongering, the very definition of having an independent Scotland would mean the breakup of the United Kingdom by definition. So it's not scaremongering, it's just a fact. Um, so that as a starting point is an infallible truth. It's a bit like UKIP exists solely for the purpose of Britain leaving the European Union. I personally think UKIP's going to collapse in on itself, and I'm not going to cry much over that. I've never had much time for UKIP. But the situation is that Nicola Sturgeon is arguing that there is a democratic mandate for Scottish people to have another referendum. Now, I'm just going to discuss some figures here. In the Scottish referendum in 2014, it was approximately 1,618,000 Scots voted to leave the Union. That's rounded to the nearest thousand. It was 2,002,000 Scots, rounded to the nearest thousand, who voted to stay. That is a very decisive result. It's not close at all. Bearing in mind Scotland only has about 5.2 million people, that is a decisive vote. That's a difference in real terms of about 380,000. To put that into context, that's about the size of the city of Leicester in difference. And that is on a turnout of 84%, which is far higher than the turnouts for most general elections. Okay, so that was 1,618,000 to have an independent Scotland, 2,002,000 for Scotland to remain in the UK. Even if you allow the SNP conspiracy theories, or at least not so much the leadership, but some of the cyber warriors that it was rigged. Even if you allow for that difference is just too big to explain away as rigging, and I haven't seen any solid evidence for that. Now, the votes in the European Union referendum from Scotland earlier this year were as follows. To leave the European Union, 1,018,000. To stay in the United Kingdom, 1,661,000. So presumably that was a lower turnout than the Scottish independence referendum. 1,661,000 to stay in the European Union. So that, okay, it's a clear majority in Scotland to stay in the EU. But notice that figure is still significantly smaller than the 2,002,000 who voted to stay in the UK 2 years ago. So what does this mean? It means that the SNP's claim of respecting the democratic mandate of the Scottish people is phony, because Nicola Sturgeon and her party have made it very clear that they have no respect for the 2 million Scots who voted to stay in the UK. Now, this is astonishing for a First Minister of Scotland, essentially the Prime Minister of Scotland, to basically disregard such a clear vote. And I just don't accept this idea, oh, well, some Scots have changed their minds since then. If you take that sort of approach, that, okay, people change their minds, if you have that sort of direct democracy, you're going to be having votes on issues every month because, quite frankly, A large number of the electorate don't think a great deal about the way they vote, one way or the other. So if you're going to go by direct democracy and people changing their minds, you're going to have votes on things every single month, which, and in that case, clearly nothing will get done. So let's be very clear: the Scottish independence referendum was a clear victory for better together. That's irrefutable. It's irrefutable. At the time, the SNP said they would respect it, and they've made it clear that they don't. They also arrogantly believe that they alone speak for Scotland. So when they fly the Saltire, the Scottish Saltire, they insist that they are Scotland. And Nicola Sturgeon and her party have this very arrogant way of saying the Scots this, the Scots that. They may be the ruling party in Scotland. That does not mean they represent everyone in Scotland. That would be just like Theresa May turning around and saying all the British people are conservatives, or I speak for all the British people. Now, for all her faults, she hasn't done that. What she has said is, I will reach out to all the British people. Nicola Sturgeon is playing a very sectarian game here, and she's smart. I don't think some unionists think she's an idiot. I don't think she is. I think she's quite smart. She's certainly smart enough to have raised the membership of her own party. But I think that's concerning because she is a very dangerous figure. Why? Because she wants to break up this country. Now, I'm not going to make any bones about this. This is not a neutral video. I am extremely biased. I do have strong views on this because I don't want to see my country torn apart. I think it would be an utter tragedy. And I'm sick and tired of the SNP creating this division. You know, the SNP lambasted the Conservatives for stirring up xenophobia, presumably because of the way the negotiations are going regarding the results of Brexit. Now, whatever views are on that, and I appreciate that there's a plurality of views there. This is hypocritical because there are SNP supporters who openly. I saw a video earlier today of SNP supporters vandalising BBC offices, and writing things on the B sign and so on. And it's childish, but it also represents a very narrow mentality. They may not be anti-English, and this is something I want to challenge. They often say, "Oh, we're not anti-English," but they are anti-British, and they're absolutely anti-United Kingdom. They hate this country. There's no question about it. There is a deep, absolutely deeply entrenched hatred of the United Kingdom within SNP circles, and there's no question about that. If you take a secret recording device into a pub full of SNP supporters, I guarantee you will hear, well, let's just say it will make sailors in the Royal Navy in the 18th century look polite. The sort of things you'll hear about there is a real toxic nationalism here, and people at the top like Nicola Sturgeon are too smart to openly show that. So whenever she's speaking in England or Wales or Northern Ireland, she's diplomatic. She uses the right language. She says, "Oh, I want to reach out to people," and etc. But she represents a party that is divisive by its nature, that is sectarian by its nature. And the way they talk, you would think that they want single party rule in Scotland. So they stir up these sentiments that every unionist party, whether it be Conservative, Labour, or Liberal Democrat, or UKIP, are enemies of Scotland. And unfortunately, that has led to some very ugly scenes. Now, I don't want to exaggerate. Obviously Scotland is not sectarian in the way that some parts of the world are. I don't want to exaggerate. So, it's still pretty safe to travel to Scotland if you're English and so on. So I don't want to exaggerate. But it is irrefutable that there is an undercurrent of frankly sinister neo nationalism coming from Scots Nationals. Now, they may not all be affiliated with the SNP. Some of them may be affiliated with far more extreme offshoots. So I'm not blaming Nicola Sturgeon personally for everything, but for her to push this second referendum. Okay, let's look at it this way. Leave aside your allegiances, whether you're for a referendum or against it, whether you're for Scottish independence or against it. One thing no one can dispute is that by putting it out there, by constantly raising this instead of actually focusing on policies in Scotland, I honestly believe that she uses it to distract her own voters. But leaving that aside, this creates great uncertainty in the same way the EU referendum did. I didn't particularly want that EU referendum to go ahead, but it did. We got, what's happened has happened. But if let's say this referendum doesn't occur immediately, because there are some nationalists saying, oh, you need to bide your time. We'll be in a stronger position in 2 years, so do it then. 2 years? I've heard 2018, 2019 quoted. Let's say it does take that long. That's going to be 2 or 3 years of uncertainty. Great uncertainty for the Scottish people, great uncertainty for the British people. And this is just not thought out. The SNP is giving this romantic notion to Remain Scots, i.e., those who want to stay in the EU, that, oh, we'll leave the UK and we'll just be welcomed with open arms into the EU. It doesn't work that way. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy of Spain, has made it clear that Scotland is not going to just get in like that. And certainly he would block it. I imagine other national leaders will too. Why? Not because they're anti Scots, but because, well, I suspect a number of reasons. Firstly, in the case of Spain, they have their own separatist movement in the case of Catalonia. So, for political reasons, Rajoy will obviously have concerns there. But also, they will want good relations with the United Kingdom. Now, if you have foreign governments, albeit governments that we have close trade with, that are essentially interfering and pandering to a separatist movement, that will damage relations between Britain and France, Britain and Germany, and so on. And I don't think they're going to gamble with that. The SNP was boasting about how they're going to cement great relations in the European Union. Nicola Sturgeon managed to secure a meeting with a junior German minister, not Angela Merkel, not even her senior members of her cabinet. That shows to me that although there may be disagreements with Brexit and so on, senior European leaders are not going to pander to this sort of separatism. It makes no sense that they're arguing, oh, Brexit is going to pull Britain away from the world and it's making us smaller, and yet they want to make the United Kingdom smaller, and they will then put Scotland in an even greater wilderness. I voted Remain. I believe it was a mistake to leave. And so, by the way, did many places in England. Certainly, many of the great cities of England had a majority for Remain. So, this once again divisive attitude, the SNP and Scots nationalists use of Scotland versus England, it's a lot of rubbish. Um, so, I really think, I mean, I detest the SNP and what they do as a party. I absolutely detest them. I don't think they've got any legal basis for this. I don't think it's going to happen, but even if it doesn't happen, they're going to do damage. Scotland is already a divided society because of what happened in 2014, because of predominantly the behaviour of nationalists. And sadly, this is going to rumble on. It's going to create great uncertainty. And to me, it just demonstrates this is the sole reason the SNP exists. Now, I'm sure I could say many other things about this subject, but for now, I'm going to leave it there. In my opinion, the British government should simply refuse another referendum. In order for a second referendum to go ahead, there needs to be negotiations between Holyrood and Westminster. Now, David Cameron granted it last time. He didn't have to, actually, because if you look at other parts of the world, national leaders, or national heads of government, I should say, don't pander to separatist referendum. For right or wrong, they don't. So, this idea that tyrannical Westminster is imposing its will, the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon demand respect, and they demand that the Scottish people are respected, but they don't respect the position of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the moment, Theresa May. They should respect her position. She is a representative, whether the SNP like it or not, of the United Kingdom. She's not the English Prime Minister, she's not the Welsh Prime Minister, she's not the Scottish Prime Minister or the Northern Irish Prime Minister. She is Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And this is pure politics. The SNP is playing to their core base. Not dissimilar to what Donald Trump is doing, actually. And, for all their talk of being a social democratic party, I think this is a party that will pander to anyone. If they had a right wing businessman who was pro Scottish independence and wanted to give them money, they would take it. Because independence comes before anything else for the SNP. And unfortunately, it's going to put Scotland in a great deal of uncertainty if they continue with this rhetoric. So Nicola Sturgeon, instead of constantly blaming all of Scotland's woes on Westminster, should start doing her job in governing Scotland and addressing the needs of all the people of Scotland. She says it's her responsibility to stand up for the Scottish people, and yet she's ignoring the democratic mandate from 2 years ago. It's total hypocrisy. So the SNP has a divisive agenda. There's no question about that by its very definition. No, I'm not saying all SNP supporters hate England, but I am saying that by nature this is a sectarian party. And some people might not be as romantic as I am. But yes, I love my country, and I don't want to see it torn apart by this divisive nationalist agenda.